breaking news. We're starting to learn more about this Wuhan supervirus, ladies and gentlemen. They're saying reinfection causes cytokine storms. What does that mean? What does that imply? Reinfection, cytokine storms. Well, ladies and gentlemen, early on, this virus was known as the drop dead virus because people were dropping dead. They were having heart attacks. And nobody had seen that before. We're going to try and bring up some of those videos where you can see that for yourself. And now they're saying reinfection is the key to the drop dead syndrome. What does that mean? That means that once you get infected, you may recover, and then you'll get infected again, and that second dose is what gets you, ladies and gentlemen. That's a pretty novel idea, and it's a very interesting strategy, if you will, when it comes to the perfect supervirus, the perfect bioweapon, the perfect doomsday device. Why is that a very interesting concept? Reinfection. That means when this virus shows up on the radar and it's never been seen before, and it causes perhaps mild, influenza-like symptoms or pneumonia, people are like, hey, that's interesting, but it doesn't seem any worse than the flu. And then when it comes back the second time around, it wipes a whole lot of people out. And it's only then do they realize that this is a killer virus. And by then, weeks and weeks and weeks have gone by, and now everybody's infected, and they're just going to all start rolling into the hospitals. And so what we're looking at here, quite possibly, according to initial reports, is a ticking time bomb that depends on community viral load. Community viral load. It's referred to as CVL. And it's mostly documented with HIV. Of course, this is an HIV chimera, so it's only kind of fitting. But in the idea of community viral load, the more people that have the virus, the more likely you are to get infected. And what we know about airborne diseases is that the bigger your dose, your initial dose, the worse it is. Because it's like an epidemic in your body. You know what an epidemic is in a city or in a country. We're seeing that right now. But an epidemic in your body is something that starts basically, infecting, the trillions of cells that are in your body all at once. And if we're starting with one person from Wuhan that arrives in San Francisco, and each person infects 2 other people in every 3 days, they call that a series. That means in 10 days, that one person will have, exponentially infected, so many people. But if you start out with more than one person, say you got 100 people from Wuhan that show up in San Francisco and start coughing on everybody, that means that after the first cycle, it's 100 people times 2 instead of 1 times 2. So we've got like a factor of 100 more in the initial infection or outbreak. And then that grows exponentially. Instead of starting at 1 to the, X power, you start at 100 to the X power, or to the 1,000, you start at 1,000 to the X power. And so it makes a big difference in terms of dynamics and, where the outbreak will go, not only in a community, but in a person as well. And so if more people in the community have the virus, the supervirus, that means there's even more virus particles floating around. That means every time you get a dose, it's a bigger and bigger dose as every cycle goes on. And so it kind of builds up like a time bomb, like a crescendo. Now, what's the advantage if, this virus first appears as harmless and then comes back for the kicker? That means that, all of these people that they're treating right now, in the hospitals, on the news, that are getting it the very first time, they're thinking to themselves, oh, their medicine, this treatment works. This medicine works. We can beat this thing. It's no big deal, right? So everybody's kind of like, okay, well, there's an outbreak, but we've got these medicines and, everything we need to treat this virus as is, no big deal. However, as the virus load builds up in these cities, in these towns, the cases will become more and more severe, and people will keep getting reinfected over and over again. And it becomes like, a huge epidemic of virus particles. And I guess you could kind of equate this to like air pollution. You've probably seen some of the maps where they count the particles in the air, like 10 microns or 2.5 microns, PM 2.5, PM 10. That's measuring like, the pulverized matter or the dust that's just floating in the air. It can be heavy metals, brake pads, exhaust, whatever kind of aerosol you can dream of. But here, instead of aerosols, like Lysol or hairspray or whatever, we're talking virus particles. And the more people are infected, the more they're shedding, the more severe or infected they become, that kind of grows the virus load, the community virus load, exponentially. And so what we could be seeing is kind of like a delayed effect of onset of like, dastardly proportions. Because of course, the bigger the numbers, the worse it'll be, in every regard. And so if this thing flies under the radar for weeks and weeks, nobody's getting really, really sick. Everybody feels really confident that this thing is, manageable. Then they all kind of go back to sleep, and then boom, they knock you out. Now, why do we think that a knockout blow is coming? It's because of what we're seeing in China. The whole thing is melting down. It looks like, the country is going to go back into the 1800s before long. They're sending people back to work. The factories are forced to shut again because there's a huge outbreak everywhere. This thing is so infectious. You probably saw what's happening on the Diamond Princess, the Wuhan supervirus experiment on that cruise ship. And, when that first came on the radar, we were like, okay, well, pay attention to this cruise ship because it's going to be like its own little laboratory, and you're going to be able to see, like how infectious this is. Because initial reports was this thing had like an 85% attack rate, which means like virtually everyone that gets near it gets exposed. And it's real nasty, and so look, I mean, the idea here of what's going on is concerning because, you can see the images for yourself. If we get anything like this, we want to know, exactly how this syndrome happens. Now, the initial kind of estimation was, well, if the first cases came on the radar December 1st, and then by January 23rd, everything was locked down and it was, just a huge epidemic. People were dropping dead and all that. That gives us about a 7 or 8 week kind of timeline for a syndrome, right? But here, if we're looking at some kind of like delayed onset in terms of when this actually crescendos or flares up into the drop dead virus, if we're looking at something like, well, okay, well, people have to actually get infected again and again, we may be looking at an extra 2-3 weeks or a month before we actually see this syndrome. Now, our initial, models where, we're reflecting, what we saw in China. But there might be that hidden element of community virus load as kind of like a time fuse to factor in. We might have to factor that possibility in. So now our window has slightly enlarged a little bit. We're starting to see a lot of activity in terms of what's being reported in the Western world. Right now there's 1,000 cases of this supervirus outside of China. This is on the Johns Hopkins website, their little map with, all of the latest numbers. But you look at the countries, and now they've got Diamond Princess as its own little country because it's got like 400 cases. And all of the other countries have like, 20 or 30, right? So this cruise ship has 400, but all the other countries with like millions and millions of people, they only got 10. And so, but yet on this Johns Hopkins website, they're like, okay, well, there's now 70,900 cases total, but there's 1,100 cases outside of China. And if you add up all the countries, 20, 10, 30, 50, you're nowhere near 1,000. You're like, maybe 300-400 people plus the princess. So I don't know. The numbers are growing, ladies and gentlemen. We're getting reports about we're gonna have to do the math on that one again. Well, we'll keep that as a side note for now. All right. But the numbers keep growing, and we're getting reports that there's a gag order in hospitals. Nurses are starting to come onto shows online, and they're starting to say, we've received gag orders with all these cases. There's a ton of cases, influenza cases, that are showing up that aren't testing positive for influenza A or B. That means, they've got non-standard pneumonia. And so we could be seeing the very beginnings of the crescendo, but we're just not at the drop dead virus, kind of level yet. And, it's only when people start dropping dead, at the grocery store, in the parking lots, at the schools, will that actually make the local news really and be like, okay, I think we have a problem here. But again, not to minimize this, because this is kind of like the end of the world kind of, stuff. This process has begun, right? And we're not seeing a whole lot of activity when it comes to, social distancing, if you will, in our country. They're just letting this thing kind of progress, and undoubtedly that's part of the setup, kind of like 9/11, but they already did 9/11. So, most people don't care if people are dropping dead in New York. They probably just be like, whoop-de-doo. But if everybody's dropping dead around the world, people are going to start to care. And that's a 9/11 that really kind of, stays with you. And so I think that's what we're looking at right now, is that kind of epic, Gladio B event. We'll have to see, if this thing ever burns out, but potentially this thing is going to stick around forever, and it's only going to be made worse by these death towers. But, that's kind of besides the point. I think most people are aware that EMF radiation damages the immune system, and you're just handicapping yourself right now if you're carrying a smartphone, using the Wi-Fi, and preparing for the 5G that's coming into your town. So if you're just a sheeple out there using the technology, it's actually setting you up for, their final solution. And when you think about how much radiation people are getting dosed with every day, from their phones, from the Wi-Fi and the like, I mean, it's a big dose compared to what people were getting in the 90s. If you were going to measure that out by the gram, ladies and gentlemen. Any case, there's a lot of news to cover when it comes to this virus. I think what we've unloaded here is a very important concept in the bioweapons research kind of field. And I think that probably most people out there will be like, community virus load, ticking time bomb, I don't care, when this thing gonna hit. But I think to people that are, looking at this from a, biologist point of view, they're gonna kind of nod their heads when they think about the community virus load as a time fuse in terms of, the ultimate surprise attack. Because even if you know it's coming, right, it gives you the impression that you can handle it. And all of a sudden it's like it crescendos into something that you've never seen before. And right now there really isn't like, a Narcan for cytokine storms. If you go through that, you're done. And that's the point of this weapon. It's like gas. It's like a chemical weapon in the sense people are dropping dead. And we can expect more and more people are going to drop dead. And if this thing, just keeps infecting and there's never ever immunity to it, never ever a vaccine to it, how do you stop it? Well, you basically have to liquidate everyone that's infected or suspected of being infected. And that's what we're seeing right now in Wuhan, this city of 11 million people. Perhaps only 6 million people were left, during the holidays. But all those people are going to be liquidated. That's like about as many people as were killed in the Holocaust. And so we're seeing a Holocaust happen right now. And of course, we're getting news that the socialist media platforms were brought into a meeting with the World Health Organization. And they were all told to curtail any type of information about the coronavirus. I'm sure you've seen this for yourselves. No matter what platform you're using right now to look up information on this virus, you're going to see World Health Organization, get your information here. And so what they're going to do is they're going to start really clamping down on all new content, whether it be videos coming from China or people talking about it. We've seen them turn off the tap, if you will, enable the shadow ban on this particular subject. And the reason that they're doing this is because of what we've been talking about. Like, this thing is going to get so bad that they just want everybody to kettle in place while they can round everyone up that's suspected of having this virus. Now, the question is, how bad is it? And all you can really say here is that if they're liquidating everybody over there in China right now, you see all of these buildings totally barricaded. They've all been emptied. We've seen, mass liquidation of people from buildings. We've covered this in the previous broadcast. We've got the videos, and we can probably show you, some examples of the liquidation, of the mass arrests, of the full quarantines. In the middle video here, they're just walling up like all the entryways to all these buildings. In Wuhan right now, it's been announced that no one can leave their building, period, anymore. And so it started out at the beginning of the lockdown. It was like people could go out once every 2 days to go get groceries. And then that became once every 3 days. And then that became once every 7 days. And now they're saying you can't go out at all. So you see how it just gradually gets worse. Day one, phase one, it's like, oh, well, we're just going to quarantine the city. Now, on the left-hand side, you're going to see like the goon squad in their white vans with buses basically empty out buildings and ship these people off to somewhere. And they've been doing this to all the buildings in Wuhan. We're talking, 11 million people, plus or minus, with the holiday crowd in and out of the city. And where did all these people go? Their hospitals only, hold like 1,000 people, 10,000 people. Where do all these people go? And right now they're just telling, all the people that are left, stay indoors. You can't go out. You're going to starve there. And then we'll come and collect the bodies later. That's their master plan right now. That's how they're going to contain the issue. So yeah, they're going to wipe out every city that's been affected. And eventually they feel like, well, maybe somebody will survive. Well, So in theory, they say 60% of the people will get this virus. And if eventually, it kills everybody that gets doubly infected, it's hard to say, how many of those people will die. We could be talking, almost like a mass extinction event is unfolding right now. And, where's our dear leaders? They're all in hiding, pretty much, pretending like, the election matters. Do you think the election matters anymore? Not really. And it kind of never did, because, these people were puppets. They were pre-selected, and they, it's just part of the bidding of the New World Order masters. But that's besides the point. Ladies and gentlemen, at this stage, what can we say about the situation is that there are many unknowns, And the situation just keeps getting worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. And that's the trend that this thing is on. It's never really like getting better. You know, there was a couple days where like, oh yeah, it looks like it's plateaued, right? And then it just, you know, boom, like 15,000 cases in one day. And it's just like, okay. And then it was like 5,000. Now it's coming back to 2,000. And you're thinking, oh, you know, everything's okay. Right? And just wait. It's just going to keep getting worse and worse and worse and worse. And it's just going to start like, you know, little by little. And it's going to be baby steps all the way until you're trapped in your, you know, on your block. You can't get food and you're just going to, you know, starve there, basically. Now, the question is, you know, what can be done? Is there really a virus? You know, look, there's a lot of questions to be asked right now, but if they show up in your neighborhood with a goon squad trying to liquidate you, take them out, because, you know, we're not sure what's really going on, who these people are. They look like libtards to me, you know, telling you, you know, this new world order, this, that, and the other. They're trying to censor the information. They don't want you to know how bad it is, right? You look at the news right now, it's like they live, right? They're like on another planet. They're in a different world. They don't care about what's going on. And that's problematic, ladies and gentlemen, to say the least. These people are in it together like a bunch of Charlie Manson groupies, and they're plotting your demise. You know, it's like a mass 9/11 mass extinction event. You know, the planes are 20 miles out, the planes are 10 miles out. And little by little, they'll like hypnotize you into thinking that you're infected and you need to go to a camp. And you'll just like turn yourself in, and your neighbors will turn you in, you know? And so it's just kind of like, it's like Jonestown. Everybody's going to drink the Kool-Aid, you know? So you really need to wake up to what's going on here. This is definitely, you know, part of the Agenda 21 mass extinction program. And you probably thought you had another 20 years, 10 years maybe, before they were actually going to wipe everybody out. You saw the Georgia Guidestones. You saw 9/11. You saw all the warning signs, right? You know, they talk about these red flag laws. They talk about the warning signs. You should take the guns away from the crazy people, right? Well, there's been plenty of warning signs since 9/11, yet collectively we the people have just sat back and just been like, okay, well, that was interesting. I guess I'll like and share and go back to playing video games or, you know, whatever, right? And we just kept letting these people, you know, do what they're doing, enabling them essentially, you know, building up their confidence. Oh, they can get away with it. Nobody's going to come after them. The people aren't going to rise up. There's going to be no revolution. They're not even Americans anymore, right? They won't revolt against tyranny. See, like real Americans, you go look at your history book. George Washington, you know, John Adams, John Hancock, Ben Franklin, all those people. Fuck, they revolted. They saw tyranny. They're like, fuck you. Pardon my language. And they're like, And then go read the Declaration of Independence. Go read your Bill of Rights. There's a reason why they gave you free speech. There's a reason why they wanted you to have guns. You're supposed to be the final check and balance to what's going on. But look, you want to give up your guns. You want to give up your free speech. You don't want to revolt. You're not an American. You just think you are because you've got a passport or something, right? But if you were American, like Americans were back in the day, you already would have revolted and toppled this, you know, regime, because it's still the same New World Order, whether it's Republican or Democrat, whether it's Trump or Sanders or Clinton or whoever, it's still the same, you know, New York club or whatever, right? It's still the same skull and bones, 322. You've been duped again. Guaranteed you've been duped again. And so, you know, look, we were going to go somewhere real interesting with that, but got a little sidetracked here. The situation is what it is. And, you know, had you been a little more, you know, real out there, you wouldn't be in this situation. You know, you saw the death towers, you saw the fluoride, you saw the chemtrails. For fuck's sakes, who didn't see the chemtrails out there? And you're like, oh yeah, well, I'll like and share a video on their beast system platform. That way I can just be on their list, right? And think that I'm making a difference. You're going to have to get in your arc here, ladies and gentlemen, and ride out the storm. There's a storm coming. There's a storm on the horizon. Mass liquidation is coming. The genocide is coming. It's here. It's not 20 years from now. It's here. How, did you think they were going to send you a message like, oh, we're going to kill everybody in about 10 years? So you might want to stop us if you can. Moo cows. You're like just grazing in the pasture, waiting for the slaughterhouse. How do you feel about that? Oh, come on. Go get your MAGA hat on. Go get your communist flag. Go support somebody on the television. It'll be okay. Forget you even, saw this broadcast. Take that blue pill. Go back to sleep. Wake up, believe whatever you want to believe, ladies and gentlemen. But look, as far as I know, people that have like any common sense right now are stocking up. They're going to the store. They're buying everything they can while supplies last. Because by the time the sheep will figure out what's going on, there's like nowhere to go. There's no escape. You can't even buy toilet paper anymore. We saw in Hong Kong, it was like the robbery of the century. Armed gunmen made off with a truck full of toilet paper. No kidding, worth more than gold. You know what I mean? And so you don't want to be, that gangster trying to just, steal toilet paper. Or even be like the sheeple, at the grocery store on Black Friday trying to get that $20 television. You don't want to be that person when it's like a full-blown outbreak and virus load makes the difference. You want to keep your virus load as low as possible. It'll probably be, impossible to not be exposed. But if you want to survive in this apocalypse, virus load and managing the disease will make all the difference. And there's no telling, if there's any hope, at all in this situation right now. But there should be. And I think that at the end of the day, what we're going to see is Sodom and Gomorrah completely decimated, and smart Christians and the like, basically making their own Wayward Pines. Have you ever seen the show Wayward Pines, the first season? The second one really sucked, and they did it on purpose because the first season started giving people ideas. But it's basically, a community, cut off from the rest of the world, and they were able to survive the apocalypse, and the like, right? And that's what you need out there. And so this is how you do it. Listen, pay attention, take notes. Okay? Most of the sheeple in your town are not going to be prepared for this, but you will be. And in about 30 days or 50 days or 90 days, they're going to run out of food. And whatever's left out there is going to be, for the most part, weak, minus the Mad Max kind of gangs and tribes that start to form in the big cities and the like. But you can be basically what can you say? The governor of your region if you play your cards right. Because these people will die out. And if you shelter the storm, make it through the storm, you can emerge from your ark, from your submarine, with your, AK, minigun, rocket launcher, whatever you can get. You know what I mean? And just go to town. Hey, what do you think about Hillary? Oh, really? Boom, 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 bitches. You know what I mean? And just make sure it's a full restart out there. We don't need this to happen again. And we know why this happened. Look, just a couple of months ago, the Chinese were, on every TV station pretty much saying they're going to rewrite the Bible. That's what they said. Every Christian out there was shaking their head. They're like, oh, just wait. Just you wait. Literally. Like, oh, you know, this isn't going to be free. No way. Right? Right? And so, well, here it is. And not only that, they got the locusts too. It's starting to look like the 10 Commandments out there. And so we should be, you know, saying collectively to Pharaoh, let our people go. You know, Christians deserve a homeland too, you know. It seems like the Luciferians are in charge of, you know, every government, every state for the most part. And there's just nowhere for Christians to go. I mean, don't Christians deserve a homeland? This is supposed to be our homeland. America is supposed to be our homeland. There's a church in every town, in every city. This is a Christian nation. It says freedom of religion, not freedom from religion. They didn't want government taking religion away from the people. That's why it's freedom of religion and not freedom from religion. You know, you see like a lot of these freedom from religion foundations. Well, that's not what it says. You know, they just try to spin it and twist it like everything else. But look, the situation is so bad. You see this video on the right? I mean, people are just like setting their apartments on fire. They can't leave. They have no food. They have nothing else to do but to basically go out like that, ladies and gentlemen. Can you imagine? I think you should sit back and, you know, when you're done with this video, just think about this being your neighborhood, because this is coming to a neighborhood near you. And we just don't understand the syndrome. But if this is a bioweapon, it's meant to evade every type of containment you can dream of. You know, forget the masks. I mean, they'll work a little bit, but it's not 100%, and it's only a matter of time. If it's not 100%, it's only a matter of time. And so this thing is meant to evade every type of containment they could dream of when they built this in the lab, right? Everything. And if you wanted to be ultra sneaky, you know, you'd want this to infect as many people as it could before they actually go into full-blown lockdown, right? And that's what the Chinese are doing right now, full-blown lockdown. I mean, they're not messing around, right? They're liquidating cities. They're shutting everybody, you know, look at, they're fusing the locks, right? They're not messing around. And they did this pretty much on day one. You know, it didn't take them too long to start, you know, locking everything down as soon as they knew what this was, all right? And right now, what we're thinking in America is with these first cases, I'm sure even today, there's probably, you know, a bit of consensus that it's okay. We've got therapies for the worst cases, and we can manage this, and it doesn't look like it's going to be anywhere near as bad as in China. But you gotta beware of the fortune cookie, ladies and gentlemen, because it looks like this cookie kind of like, you know, is like a boiling frogs scenario. And it gets worse little by little, baby steps, and before you know it, it's like, oh shit, and it's all over. And so the only thing that can really kind of derail this thing at this stage is being ahead of it and not trying to catch up to it. It's like, you know, surfing. I'm not sure how many people out there are surfers, right? But you can't catch the wave once it's gone by you, right? If you're gonna catch the wave, you got to get in front of it, right? And you got to position yourself just right. And even then, I mean, it's still a lot of work to ride the wave. If we're gonna, you know, try and contain this outbreak, which is gonna spread like waves, we have to get ahead of the waves. You know, if the wave goes by and we're looking at it and go, oh shit, that was a nice one. Do you see how that one broke? Did you see that? Ooh, I could have done so well on that one. It's too late. So we got to know that we're surfing here. We're going to be riding the waves. And collectively as a country, I mean, you know, if there's anybody out there listening, you know, that has any kind of, you know, buttons to push, you want to get ahead of this thing any which way you can and anticipate the absolute worst case scenario. That way that wave will never get past you, But if you're not anticipating that wave, if you're not even looking for it, then you'll never catch it. So look, I think everybody wants to see Sodom and Gomorrah burn, but that doesn't mean that everybody's got to go out like the China syndrome. And the fact that these people want to, basically, hide information from you and censor you and basically, do what they do: murder children, rape children, groom children, Epstein case, pedophiles, you name it. All right, so these are the cytokine storms. Right, this is a reinfection. So this means that, if this is like a reinfection, and that would occur maybe 3-4 weeks after the initial infection, maybe, then maybe we're looking at a time frame that is actually 4 weeks, up to 4 weeks more than the original China syndrome models of 2 months. Okay, anyways, just trying to drop as much information as we can out there. And of course, this thing is super highly infectious, and that's all you can say. I mean, you could be just talking to somebody for 10 seconds and catch it, basically. You might, you might just kind of be in the same hotel, and they're having a bad day on the toilet, and you start smelling the fecal clouds in the hallway. You might have just got dosed that way. And literally, they're talking about fecal clouds and the like. So this thing is super contagious. There isn't really any way to avoid it in any type of community setting. So whether it be at work, at the mall, even in the house, if somebody gets it, that's where the worst cases are, because the virus load is going to be higher there. There's just like a constant accumulation. It's like somebody smoking indoors. You just get more and more virus that accumulates and accumulates, and eventually you just can't take it anymore, right? You have to open the window, except that you're not smelling the virus like you smell the smoke. But that's exactly what community virus load is like. It's kind of like being in a bingo hall and everybody's smoking, or back in the day when people could smoke at the bars, when it was like the first couple cigarettes, it's no big deal, right? But when everybody's lighting up in that closed space, then everybody's breathing in the secondhand smoke, and that's exactly the idea of community virus load as a ticking time bomb. And I think that that is certainly something to consider, but that doesn't necessarily mean that people aren't gonna die from the first dose of it. So it's really hard to say, for sure. But in any case, if we look at, the China syndrome, which occurred supposedly, according to the scientific journals, sometime in December, early December, were the first cases of this mysterious pneumonia. So December 1st, December 3rd, and those first cases weren't linked to the Wuhan seafood market, but then there was a huge cluster at that market. So the virus, didn't start at the market, it went into the market, and then it came out of the market like a bat out of hell, literally, because this is a batshit virus, coronavirus, literally. They get it from from batshit. But in any case, I was thinking fecal clouds there, batshit, never mind, ladies and gentlemen. In any case, if the time frame is 2 months, according to the medical journals right now, between the first cases and the lockdown, it was about 7 weeks. And if we were suspected to have been contaminated in sometime in mid-January, just before they locked everything down in Wuhan, which again occurred around the 23rd of January, the night of the 22nd to the 23rd. But we know that there were a lot of cases, mid-January in Wuhan. A lot of people were infected by around the 15th and certainly before. But from the 15th to the 22nd, 23rd, there was, a high probability that each plane that was leaving Wuhan had at least one person that was infected, which means that by the time that plane landed, many people on that plane were infected, and then they went out and infected a whole bunch more people. And that happened for, a week. They're estimating, tens of thousands of people directly from Wuhan landing in up to 400 different major mega cities, right? So at least 400 mega cities got sprinkled with this stuff, and just one is enough to turn it into a diamond princess. You know what I mean? So the theory is that if this thing started taking off regularly around mid-January, and we're now mid-February, we're halfway there to the, to when we would expect to see something similar to China. If it took them 7 weeks and we're on, week 4, then we're probably looking at another 2 or 3 weeks, just being conservative here. There's all sorts of factors to consider, but just being conservative, we're looking at, theoretically, we really shouldn't see anything for another 2 or 3 weeks. Maybe less, because there were more seeds, and so in theory we could start seeing major outbreaks right now. And if they're gagging it because they know this is like the doomsday virus, then we're just never going to know, but it's happening right now. Now, imagine that it actually takes an extra 2 or 3 weeks or 4 weeks beyond that, 7 or 8 week window for the China syndrome. Imagine instead of 7 or 8 weeks to get the China syndrome, you have to add another 3 or 4 before this thing crescendos due to community virus load. Now, what does that mean? That means that in about 2 or 3 weeks, you're going to start seeing everybody come on television, on YouTube and the like, and say, well, look, it took 2 months for China to melt down because the first cases were December 1st. And so, we're expecting to see this, mid-March, beginning of March. People are going to come on and be like, look, doesn't look so bad right now. And all the cases that we've had, we've been able to treat. It looks like for some reason, China got the worst of it and we dodged the bullet. And then people are going to say, oh, well, this was designed for the Chinese and we released it and blah, blah, blah. And then, here comes World War III. But then comes the surprise. In fact, now because of the community virus load, starting to peak and crescendo, it starts to flare up into the cytokine storms. People are dropping dead. And that's when they panic. And that's the Black Friday. And nobody will see it coming because they were so sure, like, oh, well, they had it all under control. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, oh, Johnson, that's real fucking rich, Johnson. Tell us another one. First you're saying 7 or 8 weeks like the Chinese. Now you're saying another 3 or 4 weeks because of community virus load. Well, it's certainly a possibility. Again, you have to really kind of suspect the worst given what's going on in China right now. It's not like they're just having like a Halloween party or something. You know what I mean? We're talking about some massive extermination, massive cover-up, and the socialist media platforms right now have basically blood on their hands, trying to hide the truth from people, trying to, assist, the source of this virus, to cover up the magnitude of the problem. It's as if, Fukushima was going on, and people are out there, filming it, and then Zuckerberg comes on and says, nope, you can't put that up there because, the Japanese don't want us to put it up there. Well, what kind of free press is that? Oh, it's not a free press because, it's Zuckerberg's platform. And since he's buddies with Google and Twitter, then they just get to decide, which Democrat wins the election. There you go. That's what, they figured it all out over there. Until they started thinking about this virus. And now they just don't want people kind of making fun of Sodom and Gomorrah. I mean, I think that's what I think it's going to boil down to, because they're going to get it the worst regardless. Population density is going to make a big difference in this outbreak. And so they're by far going to get it the worst. And they don't want people, talking about that, because just a few months ago, probably even up to a year or two ago, we started getting news from California that they wanted to ban the Bible. They wanted to call it hate speech, and you couldn't talk about Sodom and Gomorrah. You couldn't talk about good versus evil out there. And so it's just kind of like the China syndrome. These people are going to get it, and they don't want you saying that. They want you to think like it's it's something else. But this wouldn't happen. This wouldn't have happened unless it was authorized. You wouldn't think that millions of people are going to get exterminated unless it was okayed upstairs. You know what I mean? Now, look, I mean, that's just my point of view. And that means that, yeah, Sodom and Gomorrah is going to get it. And you got the locusts flying in. I mean, it looks like the end of the world over there. And it's going to look like the end of the world in California. While I think, a lot of places where they've kept the faith, they're just going to get by pretty good. And so, they don't want you talking about that. But what you got to watch out for is that, look, these sodomites, they know that they're going to get hit with this, doomsday virus. And so they're going to want to come into your town and, basically, have coffee with you and, and slurp, whatever they can around you. And they're going to want to infect you. They're going to want to come into your town. We've seen this in numerous videos where you've got these super spreaders doing everything they can to infect other people. And you got people in, towns and cities, or let's just say towns and villages outside of the city, trying to prevent these demons from coming in. They don't want the demons coming in to spread their virus. So it's going to be important that you exercise your Second Amendment out there and find a militia, find a wingman, find a vet or two, and start organizing a resistance. But understand that this, at the end of the day, is about the struggle of good versus evil. And you'll never be able to trust somebody that isn't on the right side of the fence. And to really know if they're on the right side of the fence, you really need to know your Bible. And if you don't really know your Bible, then you're probably not on the right side of the fence. You might think you are, but if you don't really know what's in the 10 Commandments, you're going to be questioned on that. I mean, look, your job description is right there in the Bible. And if you don't know what your job description is, what do you think your performance evaluation is going to be? And you might think you're doing, I think there's going to be a lot of people who thought they lived a really good life. And, when it's over, they're going to be surprised because they're going to start seeing the smoke and the fire. And they're not going to know why. And this happens all the time. You see people get taken out in this matrix, and you wonder, why do bad things happen to otherwise good people? They're just not following the rules. And there's a secret to this world. It's right there in the Bible. And you want to see miracles happen? Just, do the right thing for the right reason. And you'll start seeing the matrix glitch around you. David versus Goliath, the oceans will part. You'll move mountains and the like. It's rather amazing. But I'll tell you what, it's definitely the pages of the Bible playing out before your very eyes. And right now we're seeing, biblical plagues decimating, China. And, people might wonder why, ladies and gentlemen. And they should wonder why. Why did this happen? And it happened because, they're persecuting people of faith. And it happened because, they wanted to rewrite the Bible. And I think if they ever want to, find their way out of their situation, they're really going to have to make amends with, what they've done to people of faith. And not just Christians, but Muslims too. And, you may not be aware of the Abrahamic religions. You may not be aware of how closely related Christians and Jews and Muslims are, ladies and gentlemen. But, the more you know, the better it is. So, in any case, we can expect pretty much the same thing out there in California, the West Coast, New York, New England, the UK, hardcore, New Babylon, New World Order, Freemasonic, if you will, diabolical states. And we expect, all countries pretty much that have, hardcore occult links to, the Church of the Antichrist or the Synagogue of Satan. I feel that those countries will pay a huge price. All countries that have strayed away will pay a huge price. All communities that have strayed away will pay a huge price. And all people that have strayed away will pay a huge price in this life and the next. And so, look, it's never too late. The parable of the vineyard tells us that, the first will be last, the last will be first. And, it's better to get there late than never. Some of you are, on the fence out there. Some of you, kind of grew up in faith and you lost your way because of, the devolution, the theory of devolution out there, what they teach you in school. Look at kids these days. I mean, they got all messed up thanks to, public education and Common Core. But they sell you the devolution to make you an empty shell. But, if you look up the law of biogenesis, you should write this down. The law of biogenesis. That says that life can only come from life. Because, well, ladies and gentlemen, it's like the chicken and the egg problem. Where does the first chicken come from? And when you boil it down to the simplest form of life, even like, pond scum, if you will, mold and the like, even the simplest form of life requires megabytes of information in a programming language called DNA. And you don't just get Shakespeare from throwing Scrabble letters, on the table, ladies and gentlemen. A program requires a programmer. And that's essentially what we're looking at with life. It's a program. It didn't just get here. And there is no chemical evolution pathway from primordial soup to the simplest form of life. It has to be designed. But they sell you this devolution like it's real, until you find out Darwin was a cult member, Isaac Newton was a cult member. All of these people, are in this, cult together. Sold their souls to the devil, selling you the lie. It's only when you figure that part out do you understand what you're waking up to. And these people on TV, they all got the mark of the beast, right there on their foreheads. Just pay attention to it. In any case, ladies and gentlemen, that's kind of like the big story in a nutshell. Sodom and Gomorrah is about to get whacked. People of faith are asked to prepare and go to their ark and ride out this storm and protect your position out there, survive so that we can reboot and the like. Now, nobody knows how this story is going to end, but it always ends much the same way for everyone out here. We've got a life sentence on this planet. And it's not about, if you win or lose, it's how you play the game. And as Christians, we're called to persevere to the very end, carry our cross to the very end. We shouldn't expect to get it any better than Jesus, ladies and gentlemen. And that's essentially what we're all here to do, to persevere to the very end. And so how you go out is up to you. But chances are the goon squads are coming. And you can do all of us a favor by taking a few of them out with you before, the numbers become, unmanageable. We're stronger together while we're at full strength right now. We'll never be as strong as we are today. We'll never be as strong as we are when, you know, the dust settles from this virus. And once, you know, you ride out the first waves, you know, it'll be easy pickings out there if you can manage that far. And having supplies and being prepared is, you know, is going to make all the difference. So, you know, you should stock up on as much stuff as you can, if you can, and, you know, be prepared. Now, you may not be able to get everything you can, and you may want to go Rambo right away, but you'll see things devolve, and you'll remember this broadcast. Undoubtedly, you know, communications will be cut to a certain extent. Things will be censored. It'll just kind of like baby step into the madness. And eventually it'll get to that moment like, you know, in the movie The Matrix, where Neo is, you know, seeing the agents come out of the elevator and Morpheus is on the phone and he's like, how can this be real? How can this be real? You know, the goon squad will be there, and you're going to have a choice. You know, you can take them out, or you can take your chances at the FEMA camp. You've been preparing for this your whole life. You thought you had more time. We all thought we had more time. But now we're facing the undeniable truth out there, ladies and gentlemen. And look, we're all here to do what we're all here to do. And when they're, you know, crashing through your door like this video on the right, trying to extract you, trying to liquidate your building, trying to liquidate your block, you're gonna have a choice to make. Now, we recommend that everybody go get you know, a radio jammer. That might not be legal to use right now, okay, so bear that in mind. But if things go martial law and they're starting to liquidate people, we recommend you have a jammer, right? And when they get close enough, you flip that jammer on. That way there's no calls in or out. They can't report shots fired. You prepare your choke point, you prepare your situation like, you know, the movie I Am Legend the best you can. And you take out as many of those bastards as you can. And if everybody does that while we're still millions strong, you know, we may have a fighting chance. But then we got to go for the gold. We got to go straight, you know, to the source of the problem. And we can't just, you know, settle on the defensive if they're going to now, you know, unleash something different. We got to go all the way, ladies and gentlemen, all the way to the end zone. We got to take this country back. 1776 2.0. You know what I mean out there? How was that for a broadcast? Did that give you something to think about a little bit more than NBC and all that stuff? Show this to your neighbors. You know, show this to somebody, you know, that you're thinking about making a wingman. You know, go find a wingman or a wing lady out there. And if they laugh at you, don't waste your time. Move on. You know, don't waste your time with stupid people. There's no use arguing with stupid people. Find somebody that's got some brains and see if you can work together. If not, prepare for by yourself. And there'll be other people that will come to the same conclusion naturally. You know what I mean? There's a lot of people that have been prepping for this for years. And so there'll be a resistance. But you really need to start thinking about this now. And if you're not thinking about this when this all starts to unfold, then, you know, you'll get hypnotized and you'll think you're infected and you'll go out with them and be, okay, yeah, okay, take me to the camp, you know, and that'll be it. So it's like, you know, when they were bringing people into the showers during World War II. And that's how they operate, you know. Little by little, it just gets worse and worse and worse and worse and worse. So if they start transforming, you know, your town into a ghetto, then they start liquidating you to a camp, you know what's going to happen. And we saw that quite clearly in the Wuhan thing. I mean, they started building their hospitals just like 2 blocks away from the crematorium. And so they're just bringing people, you know, in to be exterminated. Millions. And Facebook and ScrewTube are helping them. And not only are they helping them exterminate Chinese, they're going to be helping, you know, this new world order exterminate you. And they know your address now, thanks to Facebook and Twitter and Verizon, you know, and the like. All these people that were meeting together today or Thursday at Facebook headquarters, reported by CNBC. Check out our last broadcast on that. and our Twitter for the actual mainstream media, publications. But they're going to be censoring information and manipulating people in America so that they can be exterminated too. And so look, I mean they've already declared war. The question is, are you just going to sit there and just let them continue unabated? And I think that this should be treated as a declaration of war on just about every level. I think who's who is gonna make themselves known quite soon. But if they're if the whole system is just trying to baby step you into going into the FEMA camp, they're fair game. They've made themselves a military target. So act accordingly. Until the next time, ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to this, you are the